Shortly after 6:15 p.m. on November 16, 2009, Geeta Aulakh left her office for the routine trip she made almost every evening. After a brief bus ride, she set off on foot down a series of tree-lined suburban roads towards her childminder's 1930s semi-detached house in Greenford, West London. She never arrived. Sometime close to 7 p.m. on a quiet corner only a couple of 100 meters from where her two sons, then 8 and 10, awaited their mother after school. Two men approached Geeta out of the early winter dark. One of them, a teenager called Sher Singh, produced a 14-inch machete and hacked at her repeatedly with extreme force. Geeta, then 28, suffered appalling injuries to her head and body, and died soon after arriving at hospital. Her right hand was severed completely as she sought to shield herself from the blows. An already horrific crime took on a still more disturbing outlook as police uncovered who had recruited the attackers and sent them out that night. Geeta's husband, Harpreet, the father of her sons. Detectives soon found that while the couple had spent almost 10 years together, they could not have been more different. Geeta Aulakh, every friend and colleague agreed, was selfless, hardworking, uncomplaining, and devoted to her children. Although her husband could be charismatic, notably when he first wooed Geeta, he was ultimately, to use the private words of one detective on the case, a shit of biblical proportions. During the marriage, Harpreet Aulakh routinely put down his wife in public, while developing an apparent infatuation for her sister, Anita. When Geeta finally left him, he became obsessed with the idea she was seeing another man, confronting male colleagues, hacking into her Facebook account, and going to her flat to pore over receipts, seeking for evidence of a new attachment. When Geeta began formal divorce proceedings, the 32-year-old planned her death. The prospect of divorce was, police say, a humiliation too far for a man immersed in a shallow, narcissistic machismo, a product of both his male-dominated Punjabi Indian upbringing and his self-styled image as a gangster, involved in minor drug and immigration scams. It's sad, tragic. You have a hard-working young woman who dotes on her two children and only wants the best possible life for them. Then you have someone like him, said Detective Inspector John Finch, of the Metropolitan Police, who led the investigation. Police have treated the murder as an honor killing, although not everyone agrees with this definition. Avtar Lit, the head of Sunrise Radio, where Geeta Aulakh worked as a receptionist, calls it nonsense. He said to me, "It was much more simple. A completely stupid crime by a group of people who probably thought it was like they were still in the Punjab, and if they weren't arrested at the scene, they'd get away with it." What everyone agrees on is that when she ignored her parents' opposition and eloped to Europe with Harpreet Aulakh, Geeta Shin, as she was before the wedding, made the biggest mistake of her life. She was the adored English-born daughter of Hindu parents who had come to London and set up a jewelry business, establishing themselves at the heart of respectable life in the Indian-dominated suburb of Southall. Harpreet, in contrast, from a poor Sikh family, was suspected by Indian police of involvement in a series of violent crimes even before he entered the UK illegally in his early 20s. Convinced he was a skilled criminal, Aulakh planned a murder he was believed could never be traced back to him. He recruited a friend, 30-year-old Jaswant Singh Dhillon and Sher Singh, 19, to ambush his wife while he drank in a pub under the watch of the CCTV cameras he knew were there. Police believe Sher Singh, who had entered the UK 4 months before on a student visa obtained by Aulakh, was chosen to wield the machete as a stand-in for the younger family member, usually picked for an honor crime, perhaps because his family home in the Punjab was close to Aulakh's. He carried out the murder, it seems, simply because he was asked to. Sher Singh was young and impressionable, just a teenager, said Finch. This man had got him into the country and helped him find a job and a place to live. He looked up to him. He probably felt he owed him. The plan fell apart when Dillon approached police, initially claiming to be an innocent witness. He led them to the canal in Slough, Berkshire, where the gang dumped the machete and Sher Singh's jacket. The key breakthrough came when officers discovered the rare Brazilian-made weapon was stocked by a shop just half a mile from Aulakh's home in Hounslow, West London. CCTV footage showed 3 people buying such a machete. 2 were tracked down and still had them at home. The third was Aulakh. Despite such compelling evidence, he insisted his innocence throughout the trial, calling Geeta his first love. The dead woman's family were appalled to see him occasionally look up to the public gallery and offer them a sardonic wink, probably aimed at Anita. For them, and for Geeta's friends, there is also the question, could they have done more? Police say they do not believe she ever truly feared for her life, while work colleagues recall that she rarely troubled them with domestic worries. She told me a few things, but would say, "I've made my own bed, and I have to live with it," said Seema Siddha, a close friend from Sunrise Radio. I left with her on that evening. I waited for her. I asked if she wanted to get the train with me, but she said the bus and walking was easier. I just wish I'd dragged her onto that train with me. It's what I keep thinking. I just wish I'd done something so that she didn't go there that night. Harpreet Aulakh was jailed at the Old Bailey for life and ordered to serve at least 28 years. Sher Singh, who killed her, and Jaswant Dillon, who acted as a lookout, were also jailed for life and given minimum sentences of 22 years. When Michelle Williams met her third husband, Greg, it was love at first sight. "Greg treated me like a queen," Michelle stated. "He took me from day one and put me on an untouchable pedestal. Nobody's ever treated me that way. He was my knight in shining armor." In 2011, the couple were about to buy a new home and were designing a swimming pool for their 4-year-old daughter, Michaela. Greg Williams died in the early morning hours of October 13, 2011, in his mansion in Keller, Texas, a wealthy suburb of Fort Worth. Police say he was shot in the right temple and pronounced dead at the scene. Michelle Williams claims she was asleep on the couch in the living room with her daughter, Michaela, when she awoke to a loud noise. She got up to see what woke her when she was knocked out by an intruder, she told police. The bruise on her cheek, Michelle Williams says, is proof that she was knocked out by an intruder with a wrench, who proceeded to kill her husband, Greg, and escape out the front door. But when investigators arrive at the Williams house, they came across an unusual crime scene. They discovered that Greg's hands and the gun had been wiped clean of fingerprints. Even more suspicious, there was no DNA evidence at the crime scene. Just hours after Greg Williams' shooting death, his wife, Michelle, was brought to the Keller Police Department for questioning. Police told her the story of an intruder wasn't consistent with the lack of evidence at the crime scene. Police Sergeant John McGrew turns up the heat on Michelle and asks her what really happened to Greg. Finally, after Sergeant McGrew asks her for the 8th time, Michelle breaks and changes her story. She now claims that Greg committed suicide, and she covered it up to make it look like an intruder so their young daughter wouldn't know that her dad killed himself. But the medical examiner's report ruled Greg's death a homicide, saying it was impossible for him to fire the gun and kill himself. Nearly 3 months after her husband's death, Michelle is arrested for the murder of Greg Williams, but gets out of jail on bond a week later. While out on bond, court documents show Michelle Williams allegedly tampered with her ankle monitor and worked at a strip club. She started dating Gene Wallace, a much younger man. Wallace is a former bodybuilder and personal trainer, and also her son Lee's best friend, until he started to date his mom. Jen Wallace, seen in the background, and Michelle opened their own fitness business together. And while Michelle was out on bond for the murder of her husband, The couple even appeared in a video promoting their business for the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. Lee O'Brien left, and his younger brother Andrew say their mother was never there for them growing up. They were constantly moved around to different motels and trailers, as they say Michelle found new men in her life. Her children were never a priority for her, her sons say. In an interview with Michelle Williams' nephews, Trace and Tyler, they revealed that Michelle joked about killing Greg and moving to Mexico with his insurance money. 2 days later, Greg was dead. With a lack of physical evidence, prosecutors say was destroyed by Michelle. They offer her a plea deal, which she agrees to. She will plead guilty to a charge of deadly conduct and tampering with evidence and serve 18 years in prison. But an unexpected twist keeps her out of jail. She and Gene Wallace announced they are expecting twins. But Wallace says Michelle suffered a miscarriage, and when Judge Wish learns that news, he hauls her back to court. In a jailhouse interview while awaiting sentencing on the plea deal, Michelle Williams contradicts herself by saying that she is innocent of all charges. Michelle stated that she took the plea deal hoping for a short sentence, so she could be reunited with her daughter, Michaela. Once the judge hears this, he orders a hearing. Michelle Williams tells the court that she is innocent of all charges that she previously pleaded guilty to. With that, the judge reinstates the murder charge and orders her to remain in jail. She was tried by a jury in September 2014 for the murder of her husband, Greg. Michelle Williams never takes the stand to explain her many changing stories, and that makes her defense an uphill battle. Michelle was found guilty of murder and sentenced to 60 years in prison. She will be eligible for parole in 30 years at age 74. Sania Khan separated from her husband in 2022, despite pressure from her family, and was trying to start a new chapter, she said in online posts. She got her own place in Chicago, miles away from the man she described as toxic. On TikTok, she documented it all, from the pain of leaving a marriage she shouldn't have been in to begin with, to the shame she felt at the hands of her South Asian community, to the heart-wrenching process of starting her life over. She spoke openly, and thousands listened. "Women are always expected to stay silent," Khan wrote in one post. "It's what keeps us in messed up situations in the first place." But living independently and working as a photographer, she said she was finally reclaiming her autonomy. Then, she was shot to death. Raheel Ahmad made the 11-hour drive from his Alpharetta, Georgia, home to Khan's Chicago apartment, where he allegedly came to kill her. After his family found he was missing from his home, they asked for a welfare check at Khan's apartment, where they thought he might be. In the residence, Chicago police officers found a 29-year-old female and a 36-year-old male unresponsive, both with gunshot wounds to the head. The woman was pronounced dead on scene, and the man was transported to the hospital, where he later died. Coroners identified the bodies as Khan and Ahmad. They ruled her death a homicide and his a suicide. As a Pakistani American, Khan's killing sent shockwaves through the diaspora. Other South Asian women who have been through divorces say they have faced the same stigmas and isolation when trying to leave abusive partners. "I could see myself in her," said one Marathi woman who lives in the U.S. For her to have not only left him, but being able to survive and be happy and do well, that was not something he could live with. The woman, who chose to stay anonymous for safety reasons, said her ex-husband had threatened to harm her and her children. "He wouldn't have hesitated to kill me," she said. Experts say Khan's death and the posts she made leading up to it have brought to the surface overdue conversations about shaming, sexism, and patriarchy in South Asian communities. "Going through a divorce as a South Asian woman feels like you failed at life sometimes," Khan wrote in a TikTok posted in June 2022. "The way the community labels you, the lack of emotional support you receive, and the pressure to stay with someone because what will people say is isolating. It makes it harder for women to leave marriages that they shouldn't have been in to begin with. In South Asian communities, the pressure to get married and stay married goes beyond the individual. Survivors say that growing up, they were pressured to just say yes for the good of the family. There's this stigma in our community that puts pressure on women to sacrifice, said Rakna Kher, executive director at Houston area survivor organization DEA, to sacrifice their emotional and physical well-being for the good of others. And while we all want to be altruistic human beings, it's an undue burden on women specifically. A Punjabi woman said that when her parents first started looking to arrange her marriage, she fought as hard as she could. The fact that a girl has the gumption to say no to a guy is completely unbelievable. Especially in my family, she stated, choosing to stay anonymous for safety as well. Like, how dare you say no to this guy? Eventually, when she could no longer take the guilt, she married a man who she thought was a friend. Quickly, though, the relationship turned sour. After their wedding, her husband began verbally abusing her. When she tried to fight back, it escalated to physical abuse. Lost and traumatized, she turned to her family, hoping for guidance and support in finding a way out. I was really upset and I shared with my mother how he had hit me, she said. She told me, "You've just gotten married, so don't talk to me about this." I didn't know what to do. My parents, who have been my emotional support all my life. My mom is telling me I need to stay in this marriage because she couldn't bear the shame. She wasn't trained to recognize abuse, she said, and she never thought something like that would happen to her. But her parents, friends, and entire community were telling her the same thing, that she had to stay with her husband. It wasn't until years later, after 2 kids, escalating violence, and a bout with cancer, that she finally filed for divorce. Living in that traditional cultural setup for so long, I did not have one single person in my life who said it's absolutely the right thing to do, she said. Everyone around me told me that as a woman, I have to be the key person in keeping the family together, that I'm being selfish. Her parents only accepted her decision when they visited her house and witnessed how acute the abuse had gotten. And after she left him, she said all her friendships dissolved overnight. She too heard about Sania Khan's death, she said, and she recognized in her all the things that she had been through. The culture around us makes the men so entitled. A woman's role revolves around a man. It wasn't just that man Sania's husband, it was her whole family. The pool of survivors' care has worked with spans South Asian communities. But there's one ideology that she said holds firm among all of them. The survivors that were working with me come from all different backgrounds, different faiths, different income levels, different education levels, she said. But one thread that ties every survivor that we have worked with together is this lingering thought of, what will people say? Reputation culture looms large, she said, and women bear the burden of fitting men's expectations, even if it's at their own expense. Family members often participate in this emotional abuse, according to Kher. But it doesn't always look the same. It can be extreme, where it comes down to if you get a divorce, you're going to lose your whole family. And then there's things that are a little more subtle. Like, are you sure that's what you want to do? Is there any other way? There are also family members who might support the divorce, but treat it like a stain on the family, keeping it a secret from friends and relatives in an effort to uphold their reputation. We don't want to break up a family, Kher said. That's fine, but now there's a woman who's dead. How is that not the ultimate breaking of a family? Patriarchal systems create South Asian men who are raised to feel more valuable than women, said Neha Gill, executive director at South Asian Survivors Organization Apnagar. It starts from childhood, survivors added, when girls are asked to help in the kitchen, and boys are allowed to be carefree. Gill's organization is based in Chicago, where Khan died, And she has seen the impacts ripple through a community of women who resonated with her TikToks on a very personal level. In South Asian circles, she said, "There's interpersonal work to be done in bringing up men who hold themselves accountable. There shouldn't be this inherent boys are better thing," she said. South Asians celebrate when they have a son. There are these underlying notions that persist. It doesn't matter whether people have come to the U.S. When trying to leave her husband, the U.S. felt like an isolating place, the Marathi survivor said. The courts didn't help, and she lost faith in justice systems. And on top of that, her community treated her like an outsider. People around you treat you like you're crazy. All of these years, it has just been me, my son, and my daughter trying to figure out what to do. We as a society should say that divorce, there's nothing wrong with it. It's fine. It took all her strength to overcome generations of sexism that had been drilled into her from childhood, said the Punjabi survivor. But once she did, she realized the depth of unfairness in what is asked of South Asian women around the world. "I was drowning," she said, "and people didn't want to help." Early one Sunday morning in February 2019, Jassy Correia stepped out of a nightclub after a night of celebrating her 23rd birthday in Boston's Theater District and into a red sedan. 5 days later, when police stopped that same Buick on Interstate 95 in Delaware, Correia's body was inside a suitcase in the trunk. Correia, authorities determined, died from strangulation and blunt force trauma. Lewis Coleman III, the Providence man behind the wheel, who authorities allege left the area outside the venue nightclub with Correia, is now charged with kidnapping, resulting in death, a federal charge carrying a mandatory life sentence in prison. Coleman's trial began Tuesday in federal court in Boston, where Assistant U.S. Attorney Eliana Newsom told the jury Correia was abducted, sexually assaulted, and killed by Coleman. Newsom said Coleman's DNA was discovered in Correia's vagina, rectum, and under her fingernails. David Hughes, Coleman's attorney, reiterated that his client is not guilty of kidnapping and told jurors they should only focus on that charge, since Coleman is not facing any others. To convict Coleman, prosecutors must only prove that Coleman kidnapped Correia, which resulted in her death and traveled across state lines. Prosecutors, in November, determined they will not seek the death penalty against Coleman. Coleman, Hughes said, is more than a terrible series of events that took place in the early morning hours of February 24, 2019. Nobody wants to be known or remembered by the worst thing of their lives, Hughes added. Video footage released in court shows Correia fell to the ground outside the nightclub after she was pushed out of a vehicle by an Uber driver when she entered the car intended for someone else. Coleman approached Correia and took her hand, a moment that shows Coleman is not the kind of person who is going to stand by when a woman needs help on a cold night in the city of Boston. Hughes said Correia got into Coleman's car voluntarily. There clearly was a fight between Jassy and Lewis. He added that what happened in that car was not a planned event, and it was not initiated by Coleman. Here's what law enforcement officials alleged happened in February 2019. Correia, the mother of a 2-year-old daughter living in Lynn, went out to celebrate her birthday with friends on the night of Saturday, February 23rd. Then Suffolk County District Attorney Rachel Rollins told reporters. The group went to Venue, a nightclub in Boston's Theater District on Warrenton Street. In testimony during Coleman's trial, Aja Hiltz, Correia's friend, said she and Correia spent the night dancing and drinking champagne. Correia wore a new orange jumpsuit and left Venue with her 3 friends at closing time, but she became separated from the group, Newsom told jurors. In the early hours of Sunday, February 24th, Correia is seen on the sidewalk on Tremont Street near the nightclub, socializing with several people at 2:14 a.m., according to surveillance video footage reviewed by Thomas Sukauskas, an FBI special agent. Nuzum said the footage also shows Correia, who appeared to be intoxicated, entering an Uber vehicle that was not intended for her. Correia was pushed out by the driver and fell to the ground. A man, later determined to be Coleman, approaches her, and the pair is seen leaving the area before entering a red sedan. Zhukauskas wrote in an affidavit filed in Boston federal court. Earlier that night, Coleman allegedly entered venue and scanned his Rhode Island driver's license at the door, which showed his listed address as 95 Chestnut Street in Providence, according to the affidavit. Boston police previously said Correia, who was wearing big hoop earrings, an orange jumpsuit, and a jean jacket with an image of red lips and pink wings on the back of it, was seen entering the car near Tremont and Herald Street. It is the last known moment Correia was seen moving, according to another surveillance video reviewed by the FBI. The red sedan enters the parking lot of Coleman's apartment building in Providence, some 50 miles and an hour's drive from venue. About 2 hours later, around 4:15 a.m., Coleman allegedly parks the car, leaves, and returns with a light-colored blanket, the affidavit says. A short time later, Coleman walked from the red sedan towards the front of the building, carrying a body with long hair and orange pants. I believe that this footage shows Coleman carrying the victim into his apartment building, Zhukauskas wrote. Video footage from the building's lobby shows that, at approximately 4:27 a.m., Coleman entered the building carrying a woman's body. I am familiar with the appearance of the victim and recognize the woman as the victim. Coleman put the victim on the floor and dragged the victim to the building's elevator. The victim was naked from the waist up and was wearing orange pants. The victim was not moving, and her body was limp. At 4:29 a.m., Coleman can allegedly be seen on video dragging Correia off the elevator and toward his 6th-floor apartment. After not having seen Correia since she left venue early Sunday morning, a friend accompanies Correia's father around 5:30 p.m. to report the 23-year-old missing to Boston police, according to Zhukauskas. As the two filed their report that day, unbeknownst to them, Coleman makes a trip to Walmart, where receipts show he purchases 3 Tyvek suits, duct tape, 2 candles, electrical tape, a mask, surgical gloves, 2 pairs of safety goggles, a respirator, and bleach. He was seen driving a red Buick sedan in the store's parking lot. Authorities later learned Coleman does not have a vehicle registered to his name, but that a 2016 red Buick sedan is registered to his mother in California. Surveillance video at Coleman's apartment shows him entering with Walmart shopping bags. On Wednesday night, February 27, 2019, Boston police post a missing person alert for Correia. Included are photos of her and the man she was last seen with, as well as surveillance video. Meanwhile, a video taken at Coleman's apartment building shows him entering around 9:58 p.m. with a large dark-colored suitcase with bright blue piping, Zhukauskas wrote. The suitcase appeared to be in new condition with sales tags affixed. Hours later, at 2:15 a.m., Coleman wheels the suitcase from the direction of his apartment towards the building's elevator. A few minutes later, Coleman exited the elevator and wheeled the suitcase across the parking lot and placed the suitcase into the trunk of the red sedan. Zhukauskas wrote, Coleman appeared to have difficulty lifting the suitcase into the trunk. Between 2:44 and 4:02 a.m., Coleman allegedly leaves the building several times with cardboard boxes, trash bags, a bottle of bleach, a computer tower, a black laptop case, and a small duffel bag. Since she was last seen the morning of February 24th, Correia is never seen leaving Coleman's apartment, then U.S. Attorney for Massachusetts, Andrew Lelling told reporters. With a search warrant in hand, law enforcement officers collect evidence at Coleman's apartment later in the day. They find 2 respirator masks, among other items, and notice the cover to one of 4 cushions on a sofa is missing, according to Zhukauskas. In a dumpster outside of the apartment complex, white trash bags, a bag containing plastic sheets, men's jeans with bleach stains and a belt, a white nylon hooded coverall, an empty box of baking soda, clear safety goggles, a respirator mask, duct tape, rubbing alcohol, Walmart bags, used plastic, gloves, an empty package from a car air freshener, 3 empty packages of purifying charcoal, and a sponge were recovered. Midday Thursday, Coleman's picture is posted by Boston police as a suspect in the kidnapping case. A broadcast describing his vehicle was put out by the state of Rhode Island, and he is later found after 2 p.m. on Interstate 95 near Wilmington, Delaware. A state police trooper ordered Coleman out of the Buick and asked him if anyone else was inside the car. Coleman stated words to the effect, "She's in the trunk." There, in the trunk, police find a large, dark-colored suitcase with blue piping, believed to be the same as the one Coleman was seen carrying the night before. He wrote, "Law enforcement opened the suitcase and observed a black plastic bag inside the suitcase. Inside the black plastic bag was a light-colored sofa cushion cover. Inside the cushion cover was the body of a woman who appears to be the victim, who was deceased. The body had blood on its face and significant bruising and was bound with duct tape," the report states. A white, powdery residue, authorities believe to be baking soda, was found over the body. A duffel bag, a pair of new long-handled loppers, plastic garbage bags, clothing, a red plastic gas container, a green butane lighter, black gloves, charcoal air purifiers, air fresheners, tinted safety glasses, plastic Walmart bags, worked mouse set of dual pliers, laptop, a computer hard drive, and disinfectant wipes were also recovered in Coleman's vehicle. The statement from Lelling's office says, "Photos of the sedan show the sedan's windshield is cracked in 2 places on the passenger side. It does appear that Correia put up a struggle," Lelling adding it was not clear if the damage to the window was a result of that. Lelling told reporters it appears Correia died due to blunt force trauma and strangulation. When he was arrested, Coleman had a large bandage on the right side of his face. When asked about it, Coleman told a police trooper, "It's from the girl." A jury found that he kidnapped Correia outside a Boston nightclub in February 2019. Coleman was convicted in June 2022. Louis Coleman III, 36, of Providence, Rhode Island, was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the kidnapping and killing of Jassy Correia. A serial rapist who raped and murdered a trusted friend before dumping her body face down in a brook has been jailed for life. Wesley Street promised to take 20-year-old Keeley Bunker home safely after a night out, but raped and murdered her in a park before trying to conceal her body with branches on September 19, 2019. He was sentenced to life with a minimum term of 29 years at Stafford Crown Court, after Mr. Justice Jeremy Baker criticized the carefully crafted scheme of lies he tailored to fit the evidence. Street was also found guilty of a series of rapes and assaults dating back to 2015, when he raped and sexually assaulted a 16-year-old girl. He also sexually assaulted a 15-year-old girl in 2017 and raped another 20-year-old woman in 2019, 4 months before he murdered Bunker. "This was a pattern of offending," said Hannah Sidaway, who led the prosecution at West Midlands Crown Prosecution Service's Complex Casework Unit. "This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment attack. It was a pattern of behavior over a significant amount of time." She said Street had a mindset of "this is what I need, this is what I want," and was going to fulfill those wants without any regard to his victims. Street, whose actions the Crown Prosecution Service described as truly evil, did not match the usual image of a rapist. She said, "It's easy to have a stereotypical image of a perpetrator, but what we often do not think about is a young lad who is popular, who has many friends, who is well known and liked." 2 of the survivors spoke to police after Street's arrest, and a third had spoken to officers informally, but had not wished to continue with an investigation. It's taken such courage and bravery for Street's other victims to come forward, particularly given their young ages, Sidaway said. The trial went ahead despite concerns about coronavirus. It was spread across 3 courts to maintain social distancing, with half of the jury in the normal position and the other half occupying benches, normally used by barristers. Street changed his defense 4 times during the investigation, establishing the one he used in court, that he had accidentally killed Bunker during consensual sex after a night out in Birmingham on the last working day before the trial. Video footage shows the 2 laughing and dancing in a nightclub hours before the murder. At the end of the night, Bunker, who aspired to become a teaching assistant, turned down an offer from her friend Monique Riggin to stay at her house. "I've got Wes. He'll walk me back. It'll be fine," she said. Instead, Street diverted her to a rugby club where he raped and strangled her. When you had finished with her, you decided to hide Keeley's now lifeless body by depositing it in the brook, covering it up with branches. You then walked back to your home, went to bed and slept, Baker said. Bunker's uncle Jason Brown discovered his niece's partially submerged body during a search that involved police, family, and friends. After Street's conviction, Bunker's mother, Debbie Watkins, said she had been robbed of her precious and beautiful daughter. Bunker's sister described her sibling as one of the most vibrant, caring, and beautiful souls this earth has ever seen. In impact statements, one of the survivors of Street's previous attacks told the court she thought what he had done to her was going to destroy her, but she had not let it. Another said, "After Wesley attacked me, I was scared to tell anyone." However, looking back, if something made you physically sick in your stomach, it is definitely not okay. A third survivor described how she had blamed herself for the rape because she had gone to Street's house and kissed him. "It wasn't until I heard the sad news concerning Keeley that I found the courage to tell someone. It was at that point that I felt the full force of what happened to me. But by that time, I had already dealt with my grief in what I feel was a bad way," she said. Sentencing Street, the judge said, "It is clear that not only was she loved by so many, but that Keeley was one of the kindest, most caring of individuals. Moreover, not only has she lost the opportunity of fulfilling her life ambition, helping to educate young children, her family have lost the company of their beloved daughter, sister, and niece." If you enjoyed the video, please show your support by subscribing and liking the video, and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any future uploads.